This video will be the video on digestive system. So we're going to go into the digestive system of a human being. This will be very important if you happen to be an honors student watching this because you have an animal research project and your animal's digestive system will likely be very, very similar to this one. If you have a mammal especially, it'll be very similar. The organs will be the same. There will be some specialties for your particular animal based on what it's eating. The human digestive system is fairly general because we are omnivores and we eat just about everything. Most of the digestive system conversation will be happening in this part right here, the stomach, and the first part of the small intestine. We're going to see some other organs involved as well, like the liver and the pancreas. So let's get right into it. The digestive system is very important. It takes in the food, it ingests the food. You can see how much of your abdominal cavity it takes up, quite a bit of different distance. And so it's going to break that food down into nutrients. Make a note here, this is going to be catabolism. Right? It's going to be catabolism where you're taking large molecules and we're going to be cutting them down into smaller molecules which can then be absorbed. And then anything that can't be digested will be eliminated. So food goes in one end, waste goes out the other, and the nutrients are harvested in between. Two types of digestion, mechanical and chemical. Mechanical is like mechanically breaking it down, chopping it up into smaller pieces. So chewing your food with your teeth is mechanical digestion. The stomach actually churning. Think of like if you put a banana into a Ziploc bag, you could mechanically digest it, right? You just take your hands and squish it and break the banana into smaller pieces and make it kind of jellified. That would be mechanical digestion. Chemical digestion is with the activity of acids and enzymes. So if you added to that Ziploc bag a banana and some acid and some other stuff that could digest it chemically, some enzymes, then you started squeezing the bag, you'd be doing both. You'd be mechanically kind of pulverizing the banana. At the same time, the acid and the enzymes would be breaking it down into individual smaller molecules, like catabolism. Here's the order. The food goes in the mouth. There's stuff that's happening in the mouth we'll talk about in a second. Then you swallow the food down the esophagus, which is a tube that drops behind the trachea down through the diaphragm into the stomach. Then we have from the stomach the small intestine, which is the longest part of your digestive system, and then you have up, over, down, and out is the large intestine, and then the food goes out through the anus. Here's another picture to label, and you'll see that the food starts in the mouth, drops down the esophagus into the stomach. Small intestine, you'll notice in the small intestine we have two other important organs that are going to be playing a role, the pancreas and the liver. We'll talk about what the gallbladder does as well, just a little part of the liver essentially. Then you have the small intestine that connects to the large intestine and then out the anus. And you have this appendix here as well we'll talk about. In the mouth we have mechanical digestion in the form of chewing. We also have chemical digestion occurring through this enzyme called salivary amylase, which is in the saliva. Now before we get into what amylase does, let's remember we had our 4 polymers from chapter 2. Proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, and fats. And those were all made of little parts, right? Those were our 4 polymers. They're made from monomers. So starches, these are carbohydrates, and they are made from little sugar molecules. So what amylase does, salivary amylase, is it breaks this long sugar molecule down into disaccharides, which are 2 sugar molecules, di meaning 2. Teeth that break down the food, they come in 2 different shapes and sizes, and these are 2 terms that you should know, homodont and heterodont. So homodont is where the teeth are all the same, right? Home means the same. So like a dolphin, the teeth there are homodont, they're all the same. Heterodont, hetero means different. Look at this grizzly bear, very different teeth. They have some flat teeth, they have sharp canine teeth, and they have these kind of cutting teeth in the front. So let's make some notes next to these. Incisors, write the word next to them, scissors. That's where the word, I think of incisors, I think of scissors. Scissors are for cutting. With your tongue, push your tongue against the front teeth in your mouth, on the top and bottom. What you'll feel is that those teeth are relatively smooth. They're flat and smooth, right? They look kind of like this if you're looking down at them, and they sort of curve up. They curve up and have a cutting surface, so they're really good at cutting, right? That's what they look like. Those are incisors, they're for cutting. Then we have the canines for tearing. So if you take your, make a note, tearing meat. These are the meat-eating teeth. And so if you feel with your tongue past the incisors, left or right, you'll find your 2 really sharp teeth, kind of like the vampire teeth. Those are the canines. Those are for chopping, kind of really tearing into meat. Then these two, the premolars and the molars, make a little note, kind of put a little bracket and write plant matter. So if you kind of feel with your tongue, you'll feel that these teeth flatten out dramatically, especially in the back. They're very flat. These are good for grinding plant matter. So you think about what humans are designed to eat, if you will. Well, they're designed to eat mostly plants and meat. We are omnivores, okay? And so we're eating both. We have the sharp, the teeth in the front just for cutting food into manageable bites. And then we have teeth that are specialized into grinding and tearing flesh. So you can actually pretty accurately assume what an animal is eating based on its kind of teeth. So this would be a giraffe. It also has heterodonts. Notice it has different kinds of teeth. It has the teeth for cutting in the front, the incisors. In the back, it has molars. You don't see any canines. This animal is not eating any kind of meat. It is simply an herbivore that's just grinding plant matter. Now, some herbivores will actually have canines, large canines sometimes, just for protection. The grizzly bear that I showed you a minute ago that had all three, it actually is like us. It's an omnivore. Grizzly bears eat plant matter, but they also, of course, kill and eat game as well, so they're doing both. On to other parts of the mouth, because there's other stuff going on in our mouth besides our teeth. Obviously, there's the tongue, which really just helps move food into the proper place to be, properly mashed by the teeth. But then we also have the roof of the mouth, which is the hard and the soft palate. And the palates, what they do is they separate what's going on in the mouth from what's going on in the nose. Now, if you feel with your tongue along the hard palate, the roof of your mouth, you'll feel that it's very hard. You'll also feel that it's sort of ridged, and that's to help also kind of, just grind up the food. And so that's the hard palate. But then beyond that, where you can't feel with your tongue, is the soft palate. And the soft palate is way in the back of your throat. It's called that because it's not as hard. It's a little more flexible. And it helps to separate what's going on in the mouth from what's going on in the nose. So when you swallow, it helps to close off the nose and keeps the food from going, up there, and instead we want the food to go down the esophagus. The epiglottis is incredibly important. It guards the entrance of the trachea. So remember, if you feel in the center of your throat, you'll feel that hard trachea we talked about in the respiratory system. Behind the trachea is a soft tube called the esophagus that drops down into the stomach. Well, the epiglottis, when you swallow, keeps food from going down the wrong pipe, right? Keeps the food from going down the trachea and keeps it going into the esophagus. You heard that mechanical closing when you listen to your partner breathing, and then you listen to them swallow, and you heard that gunk kind of closing sound. What you heard was the epiglottis closing off the trachea. That prevents food from going down the trachea, because we don't want to get food into our lungs, we want it to go into our stomach. Next stop is the esophagus. Now we're going to see some cool pictures in this video. They have the ability to take cameras and stuff them down your throat, and also stuff them up the other direction, and we call those either endoscopies, if you're going down the mouth, or colonoscopies, or sigmoidoscopies, depending on how far we're going into the colon. And so we can look at the pictures of it. So this is what your esophagus looks like. This is dropping down someone's throat. We're looking down into their stomach. The esophagus is just a muscular tube that connects the mouth down to the stomach below. The stomach then. Notice this is what it looks like. This is a beautiful empty stomach. You can see that it's very folded. These folds are called rugae. And what these folds do, this is an empty stomach. Imagine when you eat a large meal, what's going to happen to those folds as the stomach kind of gets pushed out? They're going to flatten out and smooth out, and that's going to fill the stomach, allow the stomach to expand, right? Allow it to expand. So the food is going to be stored in the stomach. It's also going to be combined with acid and an enzyme called pepsin we'll look at in a second, and that's going to help to chemically digest it. You're also going to have churning going on, just like that example I said with the banana in the Ziploc bag, right? Your stomach kind of mechanically squeezes and churns the food. That's mechanical digestion. At this point, the liquefied food is called chyme, and that slowly enters the small intestine through this opening called the pyloric sphincter, which can open and close. So imagine when you're eating a meal, this is closed. That keeps the food in your stomach. You liquefy it into chyme, and then you have this pyloric sphincter open, and the stomach squeezes the food into the small intestine. That's why, when you vomit, when you think about it, when you get sick to your stomach and you puke, depending on how long the food's been in your stomach, it can be really liquefied, or it might have a lot of chunks in it. And you can actually identify, like, oh, piece of hot dog or whatever, yeah? So that just depends on how liquefied it's been into chyme. So from the stomach into the small intestine. And the first section of small intestine has got some important stuff going on, so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about it. It's called the duodenum. but it really is just the first section of the small intestine. What's happening here is that digestive enzymes and juices from the pancreas and the liver are being dumped into the food. And so from the pancreas, we're going to get a lot of enzymes. From the liver, we're going to get something called bile that's going to help us emulsify fats. And we're also going to be getting from the pancreas sodium bicarbonate, which is a base. Now remember, in the stomach we had lots of acid, yeah? Now the stomach is protected from that acid by a thick layer of mucus. I believe it says that in your notes, right? So the stomach is protected from that acidic environment. So it's able to liquefy the food with this acid, but it's not hurting itself. The small intestine doesn't have that same mucosal layer quite as thick, and so it needs to bring that acidity down. And so in the small intestine, that very beginning of the small intestine, the sodium bicarbonate from the pancreas, by adding a base, we neutralize the acid, bring it back down to a neutral pH. So the small intestine will then be a neutral pH the rest of the way. We'll look at all the specific enzymes that come from the pancreas and then the bile from the liver in just a minute, but let's finish kind of the rest of the intestines. The small intestine is called small because look at the diameter of it. It's thinner than the large intestine, but it actually is longer. It's significantly longer. It's the longest section of our digestive system. You'll see this when we actually measure our digestive system in a lab in a little bit. The small intestine is so long because what's happening here is we're getting maximum amount of nutrient absorption. What we've essentially done is thus far, in the stomach we've liquefied the food, so we've turned that pepperoni pizza into a liquidy chyme. In the small intestine, in the beginning, we've now gotten rid of the acidity and we've added a bunch more enzymes to help break the food down. And now as that pizza is moving its way through the digestive system, this whole length, the enzymes are doing their thing, breaking down the pizza, and I'm extracting all the nutrients that I can from it. It's important that you know that most of the nutrients are absorbed here. So in your small intestine, where most of the nutrient absorption occurs, that's why it's so long. That's important that you realize that. It's also important that you realize that the small intestine, not only is it long, but it's not smooth. Look at all these folds. So we're getting more surface area. On top of that, if you look at the folds, each one of them has these little pillars called villi. So we're zooming in on one of those little pillars. And the villi itself, the actual cells of the villi, are covered with cells that have microvilli. And so what is this doing? This is dramatically increasing the surface area for nutrient absorption in the small intestine. Right? And so what we get, because that's what the nutrient absorption is happening, we have lots and lots of surface area. Just like if you think about the lungs, you had a surface area the size of a football field in your lungs to increase oxygen absorption. Well, here we get lots of surface area for nutrient absorption. Of course, those nutrients are being absorbed into the blood, specifically the plasma of the blood, and then on it goes to your body. There's a photo of what it looks like. There's a small intestine, and you can see these little tiny pillars. These are all those villi, covered with them, the microvilli around them. The food now, there's another sphincter here, where everything that hasn't been absorbed, all the waste, the stuff that's ready to become waste, will now go into the large intestine. And that's what that sphincter looks like right there. The large intestine is mostly involved with absorbing water, reabsorbing water, because we don't want to waste a lot of water, right? We want to retain it. And so your large intestines reabsorb that water. Now that we've gone through the digestive system from the mouth to the anus, and we've looked at the different structures, what's happening there, let's kind of circle back and look at the enzymes and some other kind of key terms along the way. Peristalsis is how food actually moves through the digestive system. You can think of the food, it's called a bolus, so like when you chew and swallow a banana, let's say, or you've pulverized it in your mouth, you now swallow it. How it actually gets down into your stomach is the smooth muscle surrounding the esophagus squeezes and pinches the food down. This is how the food moves through your digestive system, is peristalsis. What we're going to do now is we're going to wrestle with the most challenging part of this video, which is to look at all the different enzymes and what they do. These are all the different enzymes I expect that you know and where they are functioning. So in our mouth, before we even swallow the food, as we're chewing it up, there's an enzyme called salivary amylase. And amylase, I want you to just kind of know this, amylase breaks down starches into disaccharides. We're going to see this prefix di a few times. Remember, di means two. So starches are carbs. These are long chains of sugar molecules, and now we're breaking them down into just two sugar molecules connected together. So you might take a starch that has a few hundred sugars attached together. What this enzyme is going to do is going to break that down into little two sugar molecules attached together. Then we swallow the food into our stomach, and in our stomach we have acid, and we have an enzyme called pepsin. And what pepsin does is it breaks proteins down into dipeptides. So that means we're taking a protein that might be a few thousand amino acids long, we're breaking it down into 2 amino acids connected together, called a dipeptide. So you can see we're taking these big molecules and starting to make them smaller. Then as we swallow, as the food goes from the stomach into the small intestine, from the pancreas we get a number of enzymes: amylase, trypsin, lipase, and nuclease. Now the nice thing is, amylase is the same amylase. We don't call it salivary amylase because it's not in the saliva. This is in our small intestine. But it's doing the same thing. It's breaking starches down into disaccharides. We have trypsin then, breaks down proteins into dipeptides just like pepsin did. So we're breaking down our starches and our proteins again. But now we have the other two. Our fats are nucleic acids. Lipase breaks down the fats, the lipids, and nuclease breaks down our nucleic acids. So all 4 of these enzymes come from our pancreas. Pancreas is a very important organ for that reason. It produces 4 enzymes that break down our 4 macromolecules. Now the rest of the small intestine is actually producing its own enzymes: maltase, sucrase, and lactase, and then peptidase. What these 4 enzymes do is they take these di molecules and break them apart. So maltase, sucrase, and lactase take the remaining disaccharides, our 2 sugar molecules, and break them into 1 sugar molecules, or monosaccharides. The peptidase takes the dipeptides, our 2 amino acid molecules, and breaks them into individual amino acids. So these are all the enzymes that we're going to be needing to know. So make sure you brush up on that. As far as knowing your enzymes, I've given it to you as a table, but I also think it's helpful to just kind of look at the different food groups. These are our 4 polymers that we're eating. So we're eating either carbs, which are starches, proteins, fats, or nucleic acids. So these are the 4 molecules that our body's made out of, and it's the 4 molecules in the food that we eat. So let's trace how they're each broken out. Let's think about starches first. Look back at your notes and realize where the starches first broken down. Where they're first broken down in the mouth, then they're broken down in the small intestine. We have salivary amylase in the mouth breaking down starches. Then we have amylase, which is produced by the pancreas but functioning in the small intestine, breaking down starches. And the small intestine themselves makes maltase, sucrase, and lactase that breaks down the starches. So this is the order for starch breakdown. Let's think about proteins. When's the first place proteins are broken down? It's actually in the stomach. Then the rest of it happens in the small intestine. So we've got pepsin in the stomach breaking down proteins, and we have trypsin in the pancreas, and then peptidase in the small intestine. How about fats? Well, fats actually aren't broken down in the mouth or in the stomach. They're not broken down until you get to lipase, which comes from the pancreas to the small intestine to function. And the nucleic acids, they're also not broken down until we get from the pancreas an enzyme called nuclease. So if you think about it, what are humans really hardwired to digest? Well, really it's starches. Starches are the only thing that we digest before we even swallow them chemically, right? So think about what starches are: carbs. We're talking about bread, wheat, pasta, cereals, all that kind of stuff, right? So we obviously eat a lot of that. Proteins, then we eat a lot of protein, and you should be kind of regulating your amount of fat intake. The reason we have to really be efficient about digesting our nucleic acids, of course, realize that these are in everything, right? Everything you eat is going to have plenty of nucleic acid. Talk about the liver and the pancreas now to end this video. The liver makes bile. Bile is a substance that helps to emulsify fats. It helps to break down fats or lipids. Now, excess bile is stored in the gallbladder, which is a sac-like organ right here that's connected to the liver. And so the liver's, making bile all the time, but we may not need the bile if we're not eating a bunch of fatty foods. So it's just stored in the gallbladder. Then when you eat something fatty, the bile is squirted into the duodenum of the small intestine to help digest the fats. You may know someone, usually an older person, that's had their gallbladder removed. They can still eat like a normal person, except they have to watch how much fat they take in because they're not going to be able to digest it as well as someone that has a gallbladder. The pancreas, as we just saw, produces those 4 enzymes, and those help to break down the fats. It also, of course, produces that sodium bicarbonate that helps to neutralize the acidic chyme as it leaves the stomach. And again, the pancreas is connected right here to the small intestine as well. So that is it for the digestive system. I hope that video was helpful, and I'll see you next time.